If you ran off to Tahiti for a couple months, would your business continue to function? Would you go out of business? But more importantly, would the business thrive without you being there? My name is Robert Poole, and today I'm going to show you how we can turn our business into a sellable asset that can only be done by removing us as a necessary part of the business, being the owner. This is one of the biggest problems owners face when it comes to businesses, that we get tied to our business, and we can't go on vacation, we can't do anything. It kind of defeats the purpose of the whole freedom thing, which is what most of us get into business for. What's the typical scenario? Typically, when somebody starts a business, they'll bring along some skill set, something they're good at that they did, professionally somewhere else or whatever. Then they'll go out on their own or whatever. So they're typically coming with a skill that has to be done by them at the company. Eventually you may replace certain portions of that, but a lot of us, whether we're managing other employees, whether we're doing some kind of technical skill, whatever, we're pretty critical to the company. And things don't run well, and when we're gone, we may not have things in place that make it continue to run and grow, which is the goal of all of our businesses. So the buck kind of stops with us, if you will. Most of us are sort of, type A personalities, and one of our big things is, we have problems delegating. It's a tendency all of us have. We want to hold on to things. And guess what? As we hold on to things, that means we're the one doing it instead of other people. And again, we're necessary to the business. So, it should seem obvious. Like I said, you can't go on vacation. You can't take time off. You lose that freedom that we all got in the business for, most likely. And let's face it, the stress is enormous not being able to have that freedom from our business. We got this thing, this albatross, tied around our neck, so to speak. We spend all this time building up our revenue and profit. A lot of times with the hope of retiring someday and selling our business. And a lot of us, that's our biggest asset, is our business. And yet, if you look at it, if you actually got your business valued and you're still involved in the daily operations of the business, it literally cuts the value of the company in half or more, because you're necessary. And an outside buyer would look at it and go, well, this person is doing all these tasks and they're doing this and that and the other. If they leave, company falls apart and it's not worth very much to me. So just from our own perspective of value, being part of the necessary part of the business really kills, the value and, our potential retirement, if you will. And I always like to say that, if we're doing day-to-day stuff in the business, if we're, doing tasks that only we can do, or that we're doing ourselves, we're really just employees who happen to own 100% of the stock in the company. We like to think of ourselves as owners, but hey, let's be real. That's what it comes down to. So of course the question is, how do we make this transition? How do we become an owner instead of an operator, instead of being involved in the business? And I'll give you one word, and it comes down to the word in the meaning, systems. And systems are simply, I wrote down my definition here, a series of steps or process of how we do every aspect of our business the same way every single time, that's not relying on any one person or personality, i.e. us. In my personal experience, I was very fortunate to read a book by Michael Gerber called The E-Myth, which is one of the classic business books. And this would have been back in, the late 80s. I think I read it for the first time. And I've read it several times since, because it was been one of the most impactful books in my professional career in business. And it was all about this same concept of systems and how to remove ourselves from the business. It taught me things like the concept of scale, and scale can only be achieved through systems. And it was one of the biggest impacts on my business development as an owner, and it helped me evaluate things from the very beginning. When you're starting out, you don't know anything, about business. As I've talked about before, and business ownership is a skill. And this was one of the biggest things that made a difference, is being able to start our company with this mentality of everything has to be systemized. And if it's not, if we can't scale it, it's not going to be worth anything in the long run. And I can't tell you what a huge difference that has made in our company over the years. So when we thought of things, we thought of, if we're going to do this particular strategy or tactic, we thought, well, number one, does this require us? I mean, maybe temporarily it does, but can somebody else do this task? Will this scale from whether one client to 100 to 10,000? And if it's not, we should really reconsider doing it. And so it made a big difference. Systems, again, allow us to scale. And even though we may be tempted to do something that makes sense to do it this way right now, if we can't repeat that same thing over and over and over again in large numbers, we're really hampering our growth and the potential of our company. So it's worth our time to get this right in the beginning. It also brings consistency to the company. Our customers and prospects get the same consistent experience if we've got systems in place. When we don't have systems in place, it's all over the place. And, our customers suffer, our employees suffer because they're reinventing the wheel all the time. And speaking of employees, have you ever, and we used to do this all the time, we bring in an employee, somebody new to replace somebody else, for instance, or even if it was a completely new position. They come in, and what do? They literally sat next to somebody else that knew some of those tasks and everything, and they would learn one-on-one with that person, and they would go and do their thing. They'd make a bunch of mistakes because they didn't know what to do, and it kind of dragged everybody's time, and it took months and months before you started seeing where that employee actually became productive, and it's all because there was no system in place. We were literally reinventing the wheel. It was a game of telephone too, because whoever was teaching them, it was their opinion that they probably learned from somebody else, and not necessarily what everybody else in the company is doing. I mean, it's just a total mess. But when you have systems in place, it removes the stress. It removes this inconsistency, both for you and your team. You think about it. What's a franchise? A franchise is a system. That's what people are buying. When somebody buys a Wendy's franchise, for instance, they're not buying a hamburger thing. They're buying a system that's already set up, a system of marketing and sales, a system of how you put the hamburger together in the most efficient way, a system of using the right equipment that's been proven to work, quickly and efficiently, whatever. And so that's what franchising is all about, is about systems and scale and all that kind of stuff. And there's no reason that we can't do that in our business. A lot of times we want to look at our business from the sense of, could I franchise this? And if we couldn't, because of a lack of systems, we know we've got work to do in that area. Obviously the question is, how do we implement systems? How do we make this difference in our company? And I would say there's two things, but the first one is really an attitude, if you will. It's a way of looking at things, and everybody in your company has to buy into it. So if it's just you, obviously that's easy to work on yourself. But if you've got employees, you got to help them think about this. And it's the same thing with contractors. I talk a lot about employees, but if you have contractors, which is very popular these days, a lot of times you'll use the same contractor. You have a relationship almost like an employee relationship, not quite, but they're having a deeper relationship than they used to have. And so this needs to kind of permeate everybody. Everybody needs to sort of buy into this and understand, and whenever you're evaluating something at the company, let's take this action, let's implement this strategy or this tactic, whatever, we have to look at it, and everybody has to be able to ask the same questions like, hey, can we put together a process that makes sense, that is going to allow us to scale this, so that if it works once, is it going to work every single time? If it works with one client, can it work with 100? Can it work with 10,000? Is this the most efficient way to do it? Those types of questions, and maybe we have to modify that process to enable to do that. And maybe we look at that process or that tactic or strategy we're looking at and going, what? That's, we can't come up with a good enough system that's going to allow us to scale that. And that's a big question of, well, maybe we shouldn't be doing this. So you've got to permeate the whole company with that attitude, and everybody's got to buy into it. Um, Part number two, and this is a bad word that everybody when they hear it goes, oh geez, but give me a minute, and that's documentation. Documentation sounds boring and sounds like, oh my gosh, what a pain and everything. And somebody just ran out the room on that one, but just give me a sec here. So um, documentation needs to be throughout your company. It needs to be your marketing and sales process, your client service, even your financials and your HR. All these things need to be documented. Why? It goes back to that whole employee onboarding type of experience. To take that example further, like I said, we used to do it with somebody sitting down, with somebody working with them one-on-one. Now, let's say a receptionist, they're answering the phone and just directing calls either way. Of course, that doesn't take, a ton of, training or whatever. But if they have a more technical job, I mean, that receptionist might get up to speed in, a week or two or whatever to figure out, the questions they're going to get asked and how to deal with that. But, something that's technical, particularly if it's unique to your company, it's not something that's, everybody else does it the same way. It can take months, even years to get that right. And so if we use this process of one-on-one and experimentation, trial and error, all that good stuff, all the reasons we talked about, I mean, it's a total mess. But, on the other hand, if we implement documentation, an employee can walk right in. We have all this documentation, we have all this training available to get them up to speed quickly. They don't need to sit with somebody necessarily. They can look at all the material, figure out what to do, figure out the process of what works without having to do trial and error themselves, without having to literally double the time of some other employee who's training them on how to do stuff. There's obviously some interaction maybe, but most of it can be documented in a way that the processes are right there for a new employee. And since we've implemented this, we literally, as an example, we have a technical position that's it's kind of unique to our company. They're not, somebody can't come in here and, well, they had experience doing that in another company, so it's the same thing. It's very unique. And so, but it's also very technical. And so when we would go through an employee that change over time, oh my gosh, it would take 6 months or even a year before somebody really started grasping, how to do it. And when we switched to this documentation model and started doing that, which was painful at the beginning, but and I'll talk about how we do that. But once we started doing that, we literally got new employees up to speed like within a few weeks or a month. They started being effective. They started being productive. We were getting our money's worth out of what we were paying them. Just a day and night type of example. So that's just the onboarding process is just one example. But again, this processing and documentation needs to be part of every department, if you will. You got a new salesperson in. You should have all the scripts ready, all the process of what the sales process is like. How they go through the process with each prospect. How they process things. How they submit orders, all that good stuff. It sounds painful, and it is when you're starting it out because it's big, overwhelming. But a couple things that you want to do. You want to make sure, of course, it's electronic. There's a gazillion, knowledge-based systems, if you will. I mean, you can get super fancy, like large corporations have these things. But when you're starting out, it's like, don't spend a bunch of money on it. Start out with a Word document or an Excel spreadsheet or something. Point is to get started. Use something basic, and over time you get better at it. I mean, we built, in our case, we started out that way and then built internal systems, our internal knowledge-based system that allowed us to that kind of fit our business because we had the capability in-house. But you can buy off-the-shelf stuff that does the same thing, but it allows employees to access it from anywhere. It allows you to access it, and it's not like the old days when you have like a SOP manual or something. You got to literally replace pages in there. But you can make constant updates, which, as we all know, processes change over time. We figure out, oh, you know what, this works better to do it this way. So we go in there and modify it, and then the next person that comes in there, has all the updated information. So use an electronic KB system. Um, you know, as I said, this can be kind of overwhelming to start. So the best way to do it is to pick a very specific area within your company. Let's say the sales process for a particular product or service that you do. What's the sales process for that? And when we started doing it, we thought, oh well, what we'll do is we'll have everybody write down all their tasks and develop a process, and then we'll put it together. And it sounded great, and it's like, oh, that was a disaster. And why is because documentation is very analytical. It takes a certain personality, and it's also difficult when you're the person doing the task to think, because you kind of know everything, but you don't realize how others would look at it. How is somebody who doesn't know what you know come in there? So it's very hard to do it yourself. So point is, pick a single area and then pick a person in your company that is, sort of that analytical, that anal, very accurate person that can do documentation, things like that. We've all got one of those. We want somebody who's organized. And so the way we have them is we kind of put them on that particular project of documenting, again, like, a sales process or something. And, they obviously don't know everything about it. So the best way for them to do it is to work with the main person that knows that process or knows the task anyway. They can do it a couple of different ways. They can sort of interview that person. They can say, okay, how do you do this? What's the, and again, it's very hard when you're actually doing the thing to organize it for somebody else, but somebody who doesn't know anything about it, it's easier for them to organize it because they can see the bigger picture. And so have them work with it. You can do things like have the person who's actually doing the task just screen record their work. We can all, there's so much software these days, we just, hit the record button and, they just kind of record their daily work, what they're doing. And then somebody who's doing the documentation can just kind of watch their videos, so to speak. And does it take time? Of course. But it is so worth it in the end. If we don't have, the time or ability to do that, another option is to actually bring in an outside contractor. We started doing that, and there are actually people out there, I've forgotten the term. It took us a while to Google this one and figure it out, but I've forgotten the exact term, but basically it's like a document specialist, so to speak, standard operating procedure, manual writer type of person, and they literally specialize in organizing material and setting up processes based upon what they find out about somebody. So what we started doing is, like I said, in a very technical position, we literally have the person start, press record on their, screen, whatever, hand these videos and transcripts over to, somebody that, a documentation specialist, a contractor, and they would put together all this stuff, hand it back to us and say, okay, this is what we're thinking, this is what it looks like. And then we would go, oh, no, you're misunderstanding here. This is what we need to do here, blah, blah. Edit it a little bit and bam, it's done. It's not, cheap or whatever, just like anything. But it saves us an immense amount of time. And if you don't have, an employee who can dedicate some time to that, then, you want to look at outsourcing it. And so what's the benefit to all this? This is where it makes us unnecessary to the business, because we can document everything we do personally as a business owner. We can document everything that any team member does. And so basically we make it into a company that is not reliant on any one personality, whether that's us or a particular employee or whatever. We're able to save an enormous amount of money and time and frustration by bringing in new employees and new people that are part of the company and getting them up to speed and saving all that training time and money that it costs. It removes stress from you, it removes stress from all the employees, and it really turns that turnkey business that can literally be handed over to a buyer and say, hey, here you go, here's the recipe, just like a franchise, here's the recipe, that's what you're buying. You're not buying me personally as the owner, you're not buying any particular employee, because they can all come and go and I can come and go. But if you walk into this business, here's the manual, so to speak. Here's all the systems set up, and you can walk in and suddenly your business is worth boatloads more than it would if you were reliant or necessary for the business, where any particular employee is critical to the company. If they left, it would cripple things. So I hope this was helpful today. I really encourage you to, take a bite of this and start small. And it's going to take a while, but I guarantee you, it'll yield the results you're looking for. So if you're not subscribed to the channel, please do so on YouTube, and hit the like button and share it with your friends in college. We're trying to get the word out. This really helps me personally as well as our company, because we want to get the word out to as many business owners as we can, because there's a lot of great information that we've got on the channel, and can help, cut out some of that trial and error I know I've been through, and we all seem to face as business owners, and help us accelerate our growth. So appreciate your time, and I'll talk to you in the next live.